Areas are the bread and butter of Pikmin. A good designed area is crucial for the Pikmin experience, and it needs to encapsulate all of the elements of strategy, multitasking, and extra things like atmosphere and music. This video will be a ranking of all the areas across the 4 mainline games. Now this is not an objective science-backed report on which areas have been proven to be the most Dandori-filled experiences. This is just a ranking on which areas I like the most, and if you disagree you can leave a comment letting me know which areas you like or dislike and why. We'll also only be judging the areas on the actual area itself. Caves within the area won't be affecting the ranking. This is purely based on the experience playing through the actual area. Anyways, before we begin, make sure to subscribe for high quality Pikmin videos weekly. Starting off at the very bottom of our list is the Sun-Speckled Terrace. Pikmin 4 just kinda makes a really bad first impression. It left a sour taste in the mouth of most newcomers to the series. You start off with an extremely long tutorial with constant cutscenes, half those not even having useful information, and then the first area is just really weak. It's probably the only Pikmin area I actively dislike. The biggest flaws with most Pikmin 4 areas is that they are meant to be big, grand areas, but it really just feels like they are only big for the sake of just being big. There are so many sections in this area of either just walking or waiting for Pikmin to get to a destination, and the reason it takes so long is they're just walking past this dry patch of land with nothing on it or nothing to do on it either. If they trimmed the fat for most of these areas, the design and strategies would be the same. It would just be missing a lot of these useless, desolate sections of lands that only just bog down the map. Another issue is multitasking, which there is basically none of in this map. The Flowerlick limit is the biggest contributor to this. You can only have a max of 40 Pikmin here and there's barely any opportunities for multitasking, with several sections of downtime where it feels like I could be multitasking but I just can't. The biggest example of this is this section near the final landing base where you just have to sit there and wait for 3 treasures to be carried back and they take up your whole squad to be carried, so no multitasking. This takes like 2 minutes as another example of the maps being too big. There's just this long pathway that has nothing on it that you and the Pikmin just have to walk past. It just takes some more time. The area looks pretty nice, having a good garden aesthetic, but that's about it really. Also the music is just... yeah. Sounds less like music and more like something you'd briefly play when you walk past a public piano. Overall, this is my least favorite area and it's just boring to go through when you want to replay this game. It's not even a short area at all, it's like over an hour and a half to fully complete. I'll probably have to make a video detailing some problems with the weaker aspects of Pikmin 4's area and cave design at some point. One last thing to note is that this area is much better in Almar's Shipwreck Tale. I'm not counting remixed areas for this list, but it is actually a great area in Shipwreck Tale. So it's kinda sad that they fumbled the bag so hard for story mode. The final trial is the final area in Pikmin 1. Now this isn't a bad area, but it's just really short as it's intended to be a final boss arena more than an actual area. Because of this, it's naturally at a disadvantage compared to most other areas. You solve an elemental puzzle, do the Emperor Bulblax's fight, and it's over. It's a good final boss arena and challenge, but it's just pretty lackluster compared to the other areas in Pikmin. I'd say the highlight is the actual boss fight and also the music. The music is both encouraging and unsettling at the same time. Overall, this is just a really short but good area. Not too much going on with it, which is why it's at the lower end of the list. The impact side is basically the same as the final trial, another short area, but instead of being designed for the final boss, it's designed for the tutorial, and can also act as an area to recover your Pikmin numbers. It's on the same level as the final trial, but what edges it slightly above the final trial are the 2 secret enemies, the Gulix and the Mamuda. They aren't the most thrilling fights in the series, but I like the concept of hiding things away from the player as kind of Easter eggs. Adds a nice touch to this area. Overall though, it's another short area, fun but not much going on. The Blossoming Arcadia. This area is just pretty okay and not much else. I'd say the biggest issue here is the theming. It features a lot of green with grass and foliage, which 2 other maps also do in Pikmin 4. That's half the areas that have basically the same aesthetic, and this just winds up being the most forgettable of them. Probably because it's back to back with another grass area. It's trying to go for a playground or back garden aesthetic, but it doesn't really feel like it. They have this elephant slide in the background of the map. Like, why is that in the background? Let's explore that thing. It also suffers the same issues of just being too big for the sake of being big, but in fairness there is much less of it in the latter half of the map. Overall it's just kind of okay. Didn't really enjoy it all that much, but I didn't dislike it too much either, and it has some fun bits. Next up we have the Hero's Hideaway from Pikmin 4, and this area just kind of feels like missed potential. I like the idea of exploring a house, but the map design just kind of off. Mr. Miyamoto, we just started work on the house area, I'm gonna be square with you. Oh, wow. Squares. I like your thinking. 2 giant squares is then. If I catch a single ellipse placed in this area, then your union-mandated bathroom break is lost media. The main map design is just 2 big desolate squares, with enemies just haphazardly placed in the corners of them, and the treasure mostly just feels placed there with no puzzles or tasks to solve them. They're just kinda there. It feels easier than the previous map despite the fact it's trying to disguise itself as the grand finale of our adventure. There's yet again several spots where it's just big so it can be big. It feels desolate even before you permanently kill all the enemies because they don't respawn. I like the kitchen section because it feels way less desolate, and without it this map would be much lower. I also kinda don't like the aesthetic that much. I mean, a house idea is cool, but like I kinda wish it looked more abandoned. Humans are extinct, but this area really doesn't feel like it. Do the fucking cannonballs just have Silip Bang lying around? Why is it sparkling clean? I guess the current atmosphere is alright, but it's missing the kinda nature-filled vibe that the older games had. Finally, moss is a pretty cool gimmick. It actually punishes you for just leaving your Pikmin laying around and adds a bit of personality to the area. Anyways, I like this area, but the first square is way worse than the second square, and it just kinda bogs it down. The Formidable Oak is the final area of Pikmin 3, and just like Pikmin 1, it's smaller and isn't as big as the other areas. However, there is a really fun chase section in this area with the Plasm Wraith, where you have to dandor your way out of this tunnel as quick as possible and guide Almar away from the Wraith. It's a good callback to the Submerged Castle, but it doesn't feel on the nose, and it's more of an extension of the concept instead of being a cheap rehash. Overall, I like it. It's a great way to finish off Pikmin 3. Next up we have the Giant's Hearth. Biggest problem is the atmosphere again. It's the third garden area in Pikmin 4 and they all just kind of blend in, but other than that this area is just kind of solid. I feel like another issue here is all the areas in Pikmin 4 are designed around you doing them in one big gulp. You can 100% the areas one at a time, and there's no strategy in choosing which area you want to go to unlike the previous games. If you don't do them in the exact order, you're often being put at a disadvantage, which is a baffling choice for a strategy game, and having to do a 2-area area in one sitting can drag on. Especially because most of this game's difficulty is just a flat line, and so it just decides on a whim when it's time to be hard again, and that's the Southern Bullblacks in this area, which is also the highlight of this area. It's a fun and unique enemy encounter, which a lot of Pikmin 4 areas lack. The sizing of this area also felt reasonable enough. It didn't feel too bloated with empty space and also flows a lot better as well. Overall, it's an okay area. The Primordial Thicket is basically the same as the Giant's Hearth, but it does have the advantage of a more unique aesthetic, that being this kind of mire, and it's one of the few areas in Pikmin 4 that has that nature vibe in the older games. The music here is also really good. It fits the strange and unwelcoming atmosphere the area gives off. Other than that, the area is just decent. Did enjoy it, but it wasn't really exceptional. Alright, from here on out there is a really big jump in quality, starting off with the Perplexing Pool. This area shines most with the caves that are featured in, but without the caves it's the weakest area in Pikmin 2 in my opinion. I was never really a big fan of the scale or digging puzzles here, and the enemy selections weren't really too interesting and always felt kinda small, especially compared to the Pikmin 1 area it is based off of. I've always had fun playing through it, and I do like the Bulwer and Beatty that spawn in on day 31. It was always a cool secret for people that just continued playing through the game after already beating it. The area also does look really good as well, with a blend of man-made and natural structures. Overall, it's a good area. The Wistful Wild is the final area of Pikmin 2, and it is great, but it is pretty brief. The fastest strategy here is to split up the 2 captains and split up unlocking the map, and after that is done you just have to get all the treasures. This is not a cakewalk, as the game is using some of the most difficult enemies here. Orange Bulborbs, Gatling Groinks, decorated cannonballs. It isn't pulling any punches. I did also always like how the enemies match the colours of the area. It always just looked pretty. The biggest downside here is obviously the time spent waiting for the Doomsday apparatus. It's not the longest thing in the world, but it is a large section of downtime. Overall though, it's a pretty great area. Next up we have the Twilight River. I always got the impression that this is a pretty polarizing area for the community, but I always liked it. The main thing people dislike is the lily pads, and while I find that they sometimes get in the way, I overall think they're a nice and pretty creative way of getting around the map. The overall experience is good. I like the section where you slowly build up the bridge to the boss fight. It's a nice multitasking section. There are 2 cons, and they are the literal lead up to the boss, which is this long windy road complete with 2 Pikmin tree loading zones, trademarked. And also returning here with blue Pikmin isn't as fun as the other areas in this game, and mostly consists of walking underwater to get 2 fruits. Overall though, I like this area. The Awakening Wood is just a solid and fun area, not too much to be said. It's clear that the areas in Pikmin 2 are a little weaker than the ones in 1 and 3, probably due to the caves being more of a focus. The recycled map geometry probably doesn't help that much either. That's not saying the areas in Pikmin 2 are bad, they're all really fun, but there's just a bit less nuance here. Aside from that, I like the music and aesthetics, and the enemy layouts are pretty good as well. Finally, for Pikmin 2 we have the Valley of Repose. This is the only area in Pikmin 2 with entirely unique level geometry, and it's probably an influence on why it's my favourite for this game. It starts off as the tutorial area, but when you come back with blues and fully unlock the map, there are much more tougher enemies. Feels really nice to pull off a perfect one-day run of the fully unlocked area. It just feels quick and smooth. Great area. The Forest Naval is another really polarizing area. I've heard quite a lot of people dislike this area for several reasons, but I like it. One of the biggest complaints I hear is the aesthetics, and that's too dark and murky, but I always just kinda like the vibe this area had. It's a noticeable contrast from the more safe and welcoming Forest of Hope. The worst part is the Libra section, which is kind of a pretty slow-paced puzzle, but I love the rest of the map. It's a really fun one to strategize around, especially the first day where you have to try both manage unlocking blue Pikmin with collecting some parts. You can either just get the really easy ones that are laying around so you can focus on growing blues, or you can go for the more out of the way and difficult ones to make the area shorter and easier later down the line. The Puffstool is an enjoyable fight even if he's easy, but the real star of the show is the beady Longlegs, who still after all this time is the best Longlegs fight in the series. He's just an actual surprise in this area. He comes out of nowhere, is really fast, and is the only boss in the game to get his own theme song, excluding the final boss. Overall, it's just a really fun area. Pikmin 4 has been done pretty dirty in this video, but thankfully the Serene Shores is actually a great area and suffers from basically none of the issues I had with the other areas from Pikmin 4. It's a big area, but all the space feels realized, and it felt like the size of it just came naturally instead of being padded out with long walkways and desolate open areas. The enemy interactions and treasure placements all feel well thought out and fun. The beach aesthetic is unique and stands out along with this cool sandcastle structure with a fun small boss fight on top. The area flows nicely, there's no downtime, and it didn't feel like it was dragging out. I fully enjoyed all my time spent with it. There's also the tide mechanic, which adds a layer of strategy to the map as well. Overall, this is a really fun area that avoids all the usual pitfalls that most other areas in Pikmin 4 fall into. The other areas feel like proof of concepts of what large areas in Pikmin with several landing bases could be like, while this one really feels like they execute the idea at its full potential. The Distant Tundra is a fun area both on your first time here and on the return with all the different types of Pikmin. Pikmin 3 is the game that mastered multitasking. It just feels great to do, and there's so many tools that make it run as efficient as possible. The first section of the map where Alpha and Brittany are split up is a great example of this. Your goal is to try and build a bridge, and it's basically a test on your multitasking. If you are not that good at multitasking, building the bridge can easily take a full day, but the better you get at it, you can build the bridge quickly and even get some fruits while getting it built. The same applies for basically the rest of the area. It's a really good one. The Garden of Hope is kinda like two separate areas, both being good. The first one is easy and fun enough, but then later in the game Louis fucking blows this wall up and it basically doubles in size with a whole new water section. Yet again, it's really fun. The only downside I have is that they use the same mini-boss twice. It's also the bug-eyed Crawmad, who is a pretty big pushover. It does feature the best boss in Pikmin 3, that being the Quaggled Mireclops. He's always an enjoyable fight and he's also an absolute spectacle as well. The Wii U could run this just fine, but the juice squeezing cutscenes are what caused it to lag. Anyways, this area is great. Next up is the Forest of Hope from Pikmin 1. I always mix up the two areas across Pikmin 1 and 3 because they basically have the same name. It's basically the first area for this game and it's a great first impression of Pikmin. It's an easier difficulty compared to the rest of the game, but it's not hand-holdy and knows when to increase the challenge, and there's still a skill ceiling. The Armored Cambiel and Snagris are a fun boss fight, and overall it's a really great area and a great introduction to Pikmin as a whole. The music is also pretty iconic as well. The Tropical Wilds is my favourite area in Pikmin 3. I really like the aesthetic from this one, and the music is great, and the actual map design is even better. It has probably the biggest skill ceiling of the areas in Pikmin 3. You can really get a lot done here if you invest the effort. This includes stuff like multitasking during the big boss fight and also trying to incorporate 2 mini-bosses into your day at once. It's just a really fun area to multitask in and root for. It's definitely worthy for the spot as the second best map. Finally, at the very top of the list, we have the Distant Spring from Pikmin 1. No other area has ever been able to recreate the vibe this one has. It's both welcoming and unwelcoming at the same time. It really feels daunting at first. It's massive, all the enemies are strong versions of the ones you've been dealing with the entire game, but when you eventually learn how to do it and continuously get better and better at it, it's just really fun. The music also really fits the entire vibe of the area as well. I've seen future Pikmin games attempt to get the atmosphere that this song has, but they usually just fall flat in comparison. This area is just the crux of what Pikmin is, learning to efficiently overcome the most hostile and dangerous situations. This area also has the Smoky Prog, a completely traumatizing boss fight if you trigger him accidentally. He's entirely optional, but his mark on the area is unforgettable. The only really downside I have with this area is that the Cronus reactor puzzle is slightly tedious, but that's about it. Overall, I really like this area. Anyways, that concludes my Pikmin area ranking. There were a few surprises I had while making this because I never really thought about which areas are my favorite before. Pikmin 2 is generally lower than I expected despite it being my favorite game, but there were a few areas I already knew where there would be placed, like the Distant Spring. Be sure to leave your own opinions in the comments about which area you either like or dislike, or if you agreed with my list or thought it was complete horseshit. Anyways, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe or else Nintendo will remove every single area from every single Pikmin game.